way of thinking so that students with disabilities can be integrated in regular education settings. So there are a number of factors that influence the success of inclusive education, and I highlight them right here. Right? These are some of the factors that influence the successful implementation of inclusive education. Pre-service teacher training, pre-service training, you know, teacher-student ratio, etc., practitioner attitude, the attitudes of, you know, the school practitioners really is at the center of the success of inclusive education. And we also have professional development, the availability of professional development. The professional development has to be offered on a regular basis, instead of just saying we are going to provide professional development. The professional development has to be provided on a regular basis for it to be effective. Then administrator support. The administrator, in this case, I'm talking about the principal or the superintendent, the headmaster in different African contexts. They are the ones that set the tone of the school. So if the administrator is in support of a practice, then it is likely going to be effective. That's really, that has been really demonstrated through research, that administrators play a pivotal role in the implementation of different educational practices. So that's basically some of the, factors that influence the implementation of inclusive education. Then, I don't know. The purpose of my study, I did a study in the US. The purpose of my study was basically to examine the perceived training and competence of pre-service practitioners in inclusive education. So, in most cases, inclusive education, when people talk about inclusive education, they only focus on teachers, regular education teachers and special education teachers, but neglecting other school practitioners, for example, school counselors, social workers, etc. These other, we call paraprofessionals, they are also involved in the implementation of inclusive education because they are involved in the education of students, right? So they have to be really competent in the implementation of inclusive education. For example, school counselors, their role is to ensure that students have, in the African context, I think school counselors, they are known as guidance counselors, if I'm not mistaken. So in the US, school counselors, their role is to make sure that they remove any barriers that may hinder the learning of students, all students, right, including those with disabilities, especially those with disabilities. So, given their role in the education of students with disabilities, you would think that they should be well-trained, or they should be well-trained and they should be knowledgeable about inclusive education. But there's not much research which has been done really on how school counselors are trained in the implementation of inclusive educational practices, right? So that's basically the background of this research. I just wanted to really find out how school counselors, in addition to teachers, are well-trained or are competent in the implementation of inclusive education. So the data was collected from a sample of school practitioners in different programs. Firstly, I collected data from one teacher education program where the university where I work, and I also collected data from another university where a colleague of mine works. So the way this works, when it comes to teacher education can be achieved at the undergraduate level, right? But a school counselor certification can only be achieved at the graduate level, right? So school counselor training can only happen at the graduate level. There are no undergraduate, school counselor training programs. So my participants were, I think about, I'll get to this. Yes, there are about 46 school practitioners, and they are from the Northeast USA as well as Southeast USA, specifically from Pennsylvania and from Florida. And as I said before, there were 18 education undergraduate majors and special education, there were about 14, and school counselor training programs, there were graduate majors, there were 14. And when I say graduate, these are students who are pursuing a master's program, right? So there were about 14. So in total, there were 46 participants for this study, and the majority of them were undergraduate students, right? So that's really basically my research, and I'm just going to really run through because for the sake of time here. The instrument, it was a survey design. The instrument which I used to really collect data, it was a revised instrument which was, used by the Council for Exceptional Children, but I revised it to suit the context of my study. It had 7 demographic, items. The demographic information which was collected was relating to their level of education, where they were working, if the school was in an urban area or etc. And also, there were 8 items that measured training in inclusive education, right? And there were, I'm not too sure how many items measured their competence, right? But there were items which measured their training, and their training, the items were in relation to progress monitoring, right? How were they trained in progress monitoring? Differential instruction and universal design for instruction. Core teaching. Core teaching is one of the leading, educational models in the US right now, one of the leading inclusive educational models right now. And in terms of their competence, we looked at how competent are they in different instructional practices. And finally, CRP, culturally responsive practices. How well trained are they in culturally responsive practices? Because CRP is one of the big things right now in inclusive education. So the results, I found that, on average, all participants had an average of 2 courses in inclusive education, right? This might seem, positive, right, or encouraging, but wait till you see some of the results here. So, in terms of the results, these are some of the results. In terms of their training content, in terms of progress monitoring, if you remember correctly, I said that I measured their competence as well as their training, right? So in terms of progress monitoring, there were 3 individuals here who indicated that they were not at all they were not trained in progress monitoring, and about 16, who indicated that they had moderate amount of training. With the amount of education the participants indicated that they had, you would expect that they had a great deal of training in inclusive education, but only 16 indicated that they had a moderate amount. So that's a little bit concerning. And in terms of their culturally responsive support, as I said before, CRP is one of the leading things in inclusive educational practices. The first one, in terms of their readiness, for using culturally responsive practices, you can actually see that those who are extremely capable, they were about 11, right? Way less than the average. And in terms of, the behavioral support, you have about, 3 who are not capable and 3 who are slightly capable. That's a little bit concerning as well. Then in terms of really how they provide accommodations to students with special needs. This is really important because students with special needs, students with disabilities, they are supposed to be provided with accommodations. Special education is all about accommodations, right? So these are some of the results, a little bit concerning, really, if you look at this. Then finally, in terms of their behavioral management here, right? Behavior management or classroom management, put in another way, that's one of the things that's really key in inclusive education. Teachers or school practitioners should be very knowledgeable in classroom management practices, right? So these are the results in terms of really, the behavioral management. You would expect that, a lot of them would be extremely capable in behavioral management, but that's not the case, right? So this is quite disturbing, really, considering the amount of education that these school practitioners indicated that they had. So my conclusions are, which I made from this, there is need for more training in the area of inclusive education, specifically for the graduate majors, which were school counselors, right? The undergraduate majors, they receive a great deal of education, but school counselors, they need more training in the area of inclusive education because of the role they play in the implementation of inclusive education. Because successful implementation of inclusive education is dependent on the competence, or the competence, as well as the perceptions, as well as the attitudes of the school practitioners who are involved in inclusive education. And there is also a need for different educational models. For example, offering classes where school counselors and general education teachers, or guidance counselors and teachers, take classes together rather than separating, that counselors take their own classes and teachers take their own classes. There is need for an educational model where both these school practitioners take classes which may be centered on inclusive education together at once, so that they get that requisite knowledge which is needed for the implementation of really inclusive education. There is quite a great deal of information which I left out here, but by the sake of time, I want to really give my the next presenter time to really get their presentation. But anyway, this is just really part of my research, which is focused on really inclusive education. Thank you very much for listening. Yep.
Thank you. That's a great study. That's a great presentation. Maybe because of we started all late, I think the setup took a bit of time. We are sharing the remaining time. Let me allow you, if there is any feedback from the floor, maybe a question or two, we take a few minutes before I do my presentation. So let me take up the load of the share before I do my presentation. So anybody with any feedback, reaction to our brother's presentation? Do you have another mic? The IT people.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. My name is Hosea from University of Eldoret, Kenya. I don't know what is your thinking on the teaching of inclusive education. In Kenya, we have been debating whether it can be taught as a stand-alone learning area, or it can be integrated into other learning areas. I don't know what is the best practice out there, which maybe we can also maybe learn from as Kenya. The best way that inclusive education can be handled, whether as a stand-alone learning area or can be integrated in other learning areas, maybe for the teachers to be able to get a better training.
I think inclusive education, for it to be successful, it doesn't have to be standalone. Because students have to be integrated in regular education, because that's at the center of, that's what inclusive education says at its core. Students have to be integrated in regular education settings rather than separating them and really bringing them back. So instead of pulling students out of regular education classrooms, you are pushing them in, right, into regular education settings. So you are pushing the special education services into the regular education classes so that they enjoy the benefits of regular education. Because history has demonstrated that segregated education is not, separate education is not effective, or separate is unequal. Right? So I don't think, in my own opinion, from my research, I do not think that, separating, is the best way to go. I think they have to be integrated in the regular education classes. I'm not too sure if I answered your question. Did I? Okay, okay, yeah.
Any other feedback or reaction to his presentation? Yeah, thank you. My name is David Kuria Wamukuru from Egerton University. Now I'm good, yeah. We go beyond employment. What about in the employment environment? Is there feeling of belonging so that there is that accessing the employment and the inclusion within that employment space?
I think it's already on.
Yeah, thank you. Let me use this. The study examined the current state of belonging, inclusion, and accessibility for persons with disabilities in Kenya. And here we are looking at the formal and the informal employment sector, while evaluating the policy framework and identifying gaps in promoting holistic employment belonging. So the study used systematic analysis of academic research from 2021 to 2025 and the grey literature from government and other institutions so that we are able to look at the policy interventions and implementation outcomes across Kenya dual economy structure. When I say dual economy structure, it has both the informal and the formal sector. So employment participation represents a fundamental pathway to economic independence, social inclusion, and personal dignity for all individuals, serving as a cornerstone for human development and societal progress. For persons with disabilities, meaningful employment opportunities transcend basic economic necessities to become essential components of human rights, social justice, and personal fulfillment. The conceptual framework underlying this study distinguishes between three interconnected yet distinct dimensions of the PWD's employment experiences. First of all, we have the belonging, which represents the deepest level of workplace integration, encompassing the psychological and social dimensions of feeling valued. These people need to feel valued. Do they feel valued? Respected and integrated into the organizational culture and the societal fabric. Inclusion is fundamental and represents a more deliberate and structured approach involving the intentional invitation, and the facilitation of people with disabilities participating in employment opportunities, organizational activities, and career advancement pathways. Accessibility focuses on systemic removal of structural, attitudinal, environmental, and technological barriers that prevent equal participation in employment opportunities, encompassing both the physical modifications and the policy adaptations so that they enable meaningful workplace engagement. These three dimensions operate synergetically to create comprehensive employment experiences that either facilitates or hinder the PWD's integration into the Kenya labor market. So the absence of them may make them be alienated or discriminated in the work environment. So when we look at the Kenya work environment, like I've mentioned, we have the formal sector, which employs about 16%. It creates part of the 16.4% of the total employment. Then we have the informal sector, which is the major. It has 83.6% of the total employment. So, but when we look at the informal sector, we see that the flexibility inherent within the informal sector may accommodate diverse abilities and working styles more readily than the formal sector. And here we are looking at the opportunity we can get and the interventions we can make, because we have realized that the informal sector is the area that has more employment. And when we look at the kind of training of majority of the people with disabilities, they are doing those activities that are leading to some of the informal sector. So how can we create that environment, be conducive, so that it has both accessibility and inclusion, and therefore they feel that they belong? So the objectives of this study were to assess the current state of belonging, inclusion, and accessibility for people with disabilities in formal and informal employment sector in Kenya, and to evaluate the policy framework and identify gaps in promoting holistic employment belonging for PWDs in Kenya formal and informal sector. I'll rush through the findings because of time. And first of all, we look at the assessment of belonging, inclusion, and accessibility in formal and informal employment sector. The study revealed profound disparities in PWD's employment participation across Kenya formal and informal sector, with the gap between policy intentions and implementation outcomes in the formal sector. Despite the constitutional mandates and the legislative requirements of having 5% employment in salvation, actual PWD's representation remain merely at only 1.3% of the total public workforce. This means we have not realized the expected constitutional requirement and legal requirement. This represents a substantial implementation failure, with only 35% of public institutions employing any PWDs whatsoever in their institutions. It means we have 65 of our public institutions. They do not have anybody in their workforce who is employed as somebody with the PWD. The findings suggest that legal framework, while necessary, are insufficient to ensure meaningful employment inclusion without robust implementation mechanisms, accountability systems, and cultural transformation within the hiring institutions. The private sector presents additional complexities that compound the public sector challenges. Available evidence suggests that private sector PWD's employment rates may even be lower than the public sector rates, as the private institutions face fewer regulatory oversight mechanisms and compliance monitoring systems. We don't have very clear way of monitoring. How are the private sector employing and complying with the rules and the regulations? And therefore, they could even be performing at a lower rate. The absence of systematic disability integrated employment data across private sector organizations represent a critical knowledge gap that undermines evidence-based policy development and limits understanding of sectoral variations in inclusion practices. The informal sector, while employing 83.6% of the Kenyan workforce, present a paradoxical situation for PWD's employment. On one hand, the sector inherent inflexibilities, lowers entry barriers, reduces formal qualifications requirements, and accommodates diverse working arrangements that provide opportunities for PWDs than the formal sector. However, even within the informal sector, systemic barriers persist, including lack of social support systems, inadequate accessibility infrastructure, and limited awareness of disability inclusion principles among the employers. And I think that is a major one, that many of the employers lack the awareness of disability inclusion principles and practices. And therefore, those that do it, it's out of their goodwill and their good intentions. But do they follow the expected regulations? The absence of regulatory framework, workforce accessibility standards, and the social protection mechanisms and anti-discrimination enforcement creates vulnerabilities that may disproportionately affect the PWDs who require additional support systems and reasonable accommodation. The economic implications of the current PWD's employment inclusion patterns are substantial and multifaceted, demanding urgent policy attention. So we are not only denying the PWDs opportunity for employment, but we are creating an economic gap. There are losses. When these people are not employed, they are not contributing to the economy. That is a loss. And I think a study should be done to see how much do we lose by not employing these people so that they are productive members of our society. PWD's exclusion present not only merely a social injustice, but a significant drag of the national economic development. The magnitude of these economic costs suggests that comprehensive PWD's employment inclusion represents a sound economic investment rather than merely a social expenditure. Workplace belonging, the deepest dimension of employment inclusion, remains largely unmeasured. Do we know whether these people belong when they are employed? That is an area that remains largely unmeasured and unaddressed in the current research and the policy framework. So challenge to the researchers to research on that. And it represents a very critical gap in understanding the PWD's employment experiences. While studies document employment participation rates, the legal compliance measurements, limited research examines quality of the employment experiences, workplace relationships, and the career advancement opportunities, or the psychological dimensions of workplace integration for PWDs in the employment sector. Social support for family, community members, and employers are significant influencing employment success for persons with disability. However, most research focuses on labor supply side factors rather than the demand side belonging and inclusion dynamics. The gap reflects broader challenges in conceptualizing and measuring belonging, which encompasses subjective experience of acceptance, value, and integration that extend beyond the objective participation matrix. The absence of belonging-focused research limits understanding of factors that promote retention, job satisfaction, and career progression among the PWDs who do achieve employment. We are not even talking about those who do not. There are so many who do not achieve that. But this study focused on those in employment and feeling belonging. But we need also a study to look at those that are out there. How are they in addressing this issue of belonging? The housing accessibility is another challenge. It's an area that is very critical yet underexplored factors in PWD's outcomes. We have seen like the housing survey in 2023-2024. It showed that there is significance in accessibility of housing for PWDs in their workplaces. And these residential barriers can compound employment challenges by limiting PWDs' ability to live independently, access transportation, and maintain the stability. So we have that disconnection between housing and employment accessibility, which need also to be addressed. I'm rushing over because my time is over, although we started late. Evaluation of policy framework and gaps in holistic employment belonging. The policy landscape governing PWD's employment in Kenya present a complex picture of comprehensive legal foundation, coupled with significant implementation challenges and sectoral gaps that undermine effectiveness. We have the recent studies that have been done, and also the Persons with Disability Act 2025, which represent the most significant legislative advancement in PWD's rights, establishing robust legal framework for employment inclusion, reasonable accommodation, and anti-discrimination. There are substantial gaps between these legal requirements and actual implementation outcomes. And that's why we are talking of that 1.3% PWD's employment instead of the 5% that is required by the law. The gap between legal mandate and the practical implementation guidance creates uncertainty for employers while limiting accessibility improvement that could enhance PWD's employment opportunities and workplace belonging. The informal sector presents unique policy challenges that current framework inadequately addresses, representing a critical oversight given its dominance in the Kenyan economy. The Kenya government 2023 strategy for extending social protection to informal and the rural economy workers represent positive progress in recognizing informal sector needs. But the PWD specific professions within this strategy require substantial strengthening. The strategy focuses on digital technology, mobile money transfer as a delivery mechanism for social protection coverage, but it inadequately excludes PWDs who face digital accessibility barriers or lack access to assistive technologies necessary to engage in this particular platform. So we have platforms, we have policies, but are they accessing them? The other one, the strategy of the voluntary participation. You know, the fact that the policy talks of voluntary participation. It limits coverage of the PWDs who face financial constraints or lack awareness of availability of these programs. So organizational commitment to disability inclusion must be demonstrated through concrete and context-specific policies and training programs rather than general policy statements. So we see that interaction. So where we see the recent reforms, introducing comprehensive social protection schemes, including the Social Health Insurance Fund. We are very familiar with that. And enhancing National Social Security Fund contribution. However, these systems have a challenge in accessibility and inclusion of the PWDs and their integration with the employment inclusion efforts. They remain unclear. So we have policies, but do they really address the needs of the PWDs, especially those who are employed, and them feeling that they belong and they are included? The absence of specific provisions for PWDs within the social protection reforms limits their potential to serve as enablers for employment participation through improved health access, financial security, and social support systems. Disability inclusion requires proactive integration. It requires proactive integration into all policy frameworks rather than reactive accommodation. Because of time, I'll just give you my conclusion that the research concludes that achieving authentic employment belonging for PWDs in Kenya requires moving beyond the compliance-focused approaches towards genuine cultural transformation that recognizes disability inclusion as both a human right and imperative, that is both a human rights imperative and an economic development opportunity essential for national prosperity and national development. So it is very important we consider that we appreciate that aspect, that we need to go beyond the inclusion. In terms of recommendation, this study is recommending strengthening implementation mechanisms and accountability systems, comprehensive informal sector integration, workplace belonging and social inclusion initiatives, and enhanced data collection and evidence-based systems. Because we have realized that even data for PWDs, special needs in our database, is not well corrected. We still have data gaps. And without proper data, we cannot be able to plan for them. We cannot be able to address the challenges without proper data. So enhanced data collection and evidence-based systems is very crucial for this. Then there is also the multi-sectoral coordination and partnership development. We need this. And this partnership, like we have been talking about, will be very important to bring on board the informal sector so that they now play synergetically with the formal sector, and we promote employment of people with disabilities, but also address the issue of inclusion and them feeling belonging in that work environment to reduce attrition. Because some are employed, but they end up moving out of those jobs because they cannot cope. They don't feel they belong. Otherwise, thank you very much. That brings me to the end of my presentation because my time is over. Thank you. I can see the next presenter is ready. Or there is a quick question. There is a quick question for 1 minute. Robert, I'm taking two of your minutes.
Okay, good morning. I'm not sure what I'm going to say if it's a question, but I'm looking at employment for persons with disabilities, and specifically in Kenya. And maybe my contribution is sometimes people with disabilities don't get this employment, and sometimes it's not because of stigmatization or feeling that they're not able or lack of information, but I've seen situations whereby they do not get employment because of certain bills that have been passed that are in favor of people with disabilities, and employers feel that they are being inconvenienced. For example, in a situation whereby you are employing a person with a hearing impairment, according to the Constitution, when you employ such like a person, and then it adds you a wage burden of employing an interpreter for him. And so employers will resort, instead of employing two people at the same time, let me resort to a person who has the ability to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a good contribution. And this is where we are saying we need partnership and awareness, so that when we are employing people with disability, the employers should be ready to take the burden of the extra cost, because this is a constitutional requirement. And I think one of the major gaps is the enforcement. You know, it is not a matter of choice. They are supposed to comply with the Constitution. So whether it has extra cost or not, they should be able to bring on board these people and bear the extra cost, because it is a constitutional requirement. So you bring the issue of enforcement of the registrations. Thank you. Any other one more before she presents, so we can take two.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is John Chege, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. Mine is not a question, but a contribution or an opinion. Well, I feel like I'm a person with disability, and sometimes you find that the skills that are marketable somehow, in quote unquote, end up not in favor of most of the PWD. You see, there's not that liberty of getting to choose the career that you would like to pursue based on the fact that perhaps just for example, a blind person, you do not expect that person to go and pursue something like a bachelor's degree in engineering or medicine and surgery. You see, there's such kind of a limitation. So I will maybe make a proposal that we maybe come up with ways of bridging the discriminatory part in terms of career choice.
Beautiful. I think he has brought a good contribution, thinking about guidance of these people. When they are getting into the schools and the colleges, there is need for counseling and guidance on the career choices, so that they take careers that will be more adaptable to their conditions, so that they may not also, when they go to the employment sector, these employers will not have challenges, and even them, it will be easier for them to take those careers and manage them. Thank you so much. I think my time now is over. Back to, good. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is, I have a co-presenter, but I'm not sure where. I think she has a session that is just ending right now, but because of time, I will start, and then she will help me when she gets here. So again, my name is Robai Werunga, and I'm assistant professor of special education at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. And my presentation with Dr. Flora Feather is on work that we did together back in 2023. And what we did is we surveyed a number of secondary school teachers to gain their perspectives about their readiness to serve students with special needs in their inclusive classrooms. So, but first I would like to acknowledge some people that made the research possible. First one is the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship Program that sponsored my time in Kenya in 2023. I spent 3 months here, and that time gave me the opportunity to do the work. And second, I would like to acknowledge colleagues from Egerton University that went into the schools to provide, to collect, to give the surveys to the teachers in the schools and to collect those forms and bring them back to us for analysis. And this is Dr. Joel Ngeno, Dr. Noah Kiveu, Dr. Ann Barmau, and Dr. Anthony Sang. So a little background about what informed our research. We know that the Kenyan government does recognize the need for high quality education for students with special needs. But however, even with the existing initiatives, we know that the needs of students with special needs are not fully met. And we have many dropouts for those students with special needs. We have some that are still not accessing school, especially in the rural areas. At the secondary levels, especially, the challenges are glaring, and that's why we focus on this survey. Educator efficacy and preparedness is still an issue at the secondary level. Issues around capacity building. We know that our teachers are faced with large numbers of classes, and in that case, they are not able to provide the supports they need for those students that need them. We also know that this lack of specialized supports, especially at the secondary level. And we know that research tells that the teacher preparedness is limited in Kenya. Research on how teachers are prepared to provide these services is limited. When we were doing literature review, there was very limited work that really pointed to the teacher preparedness to serve students with special needs at the secondary level. But we know KISE, and all of us who are at KISE, has been around for a while and is doing the work, especially for the earlier grades, preschool to about 5th grade. We know that KISE is doing that work well to provide training for teachers working with those grades. But beyond that, there's no evidence of teachers receiving those supports, especially for inclusive classrooms. So what informed our survey was the fact that there's need for an understanding of what teachers know. So it was best to go to them and ask them how they feel prepared to support students with special needs. It's good. I just keep on messing it up. Yeah. I think it's fine. Maybe not. So, those of us in Kenya, we are familiar with the Kenya Vision 2030 pillars. And the first one was the economic pillar, moving the economic up the value chain. But I highlighted the second part, and then in red and green, because that applies to the students with special needs. The pillar number 2 talks about the social pillar, investing in the people of Kenya to seek to engender just, cohesive, and equitable social development in clean and secure environment. The third, the green dot, talks about education and training, talking about health, water, sanitation, environmental housing, and all that. But then we have the board make the pillar also make special provisions for Kenyans with various disabilities and previously marginalized communities. That is in the vision. I'm sorry, this keeps on going off. But that is in the Kenyan Vision 2020. By 2030, by 2030, this is what they say we should have accomplished. So that was my focus. If the government from the top is saying this is where we are supposed to be in 2030, then what is happening, especially in education, basic education and training, to make sure that that particular pillar, number 2, that pertains to students with special needs, is moving forward so that they will be there at 2020, because we are not there as it is right now. So I will forward a little bit. That's more about the Vision 2020, or the details are in there. I will go a little bit ahead so that I can get into what we did. So going into our survey, this was our research question. What is the reality on the ground, on the front? Really, I'm rewording that. What are educator perspectives in regarding special needs education and inclusion? And we did survey teachers in 2023, and the purpose was to gain the perspectives of the secondary teachers, just secondary teachers, and in Kenya, that is from, in the perspectives from the US, it will be like 9th grade to 12th, so that will be the high school equivalent of the United States. So we wanted to find what did they think about their experiences and their training and their preparedness in serving the students with special needs in their inclusive classrooms. So our data collection procedures included a survey that was adopted and modified from Paria 2024 and Juki 2021. And our survey items, they included demographic data for the teachers, personal and professional demographic data, and then we had items on familiarity with the various disabilities that their students present, and then we also had items that addressed perspectives on the learning and teaching of the students with special needs. So we focus on the how and where we ask them how those students should be taught and where those students need to be taught. So we also had 3 open-ended questions that asked them to list what they perceive to be their own personal strengths in serving students with special needs, and also a question on what supports they have, and the last one was questions on challenges. So the data analysis was 2-part. We had a total of 106 teachers, and we had actually more than 100 teachers, but about 20 of the responses we removed because they were incomplete, and these were the 106 are the ones that completed the survey completely. And the data analysis was 2-part. We had inferential and descriptive analysis. All right, these are some of the findings. Starting with participant gender, we had about almost equal participants for male and female. We had about 54% of male teachers, 54% of male teachers respond, and 46% of female teachers respond. And looking at the region, and this was really because the professors that went out to do the surveys were from Egerton, and you'll find that it is a higher concentration here in the area of Nakuru, where it's in the region where Egerton is located. We had most of the participants from Egerton. So from Nakuru area, 85. We had about 6.6 from Kisii area, and then 7.5 from Baringo. Looking at the age ranges of the teachers, we had teachers from age 21 to 59 that responded to the survey. And then when we looked at the types of schools they taught, we had 3 categories. We had a day school, boarding school, or day and boarding. And we had teachers who taught, 63% taught in a day school, meaning the students went home after the day, every day, and came back in the morning. We had 34% of the teachers that taught in boarding schools, and then we had about 3% of the teachers that taught in a school that was both day and boarding. So when we looked at the question on college courses on students with special needs, this is the percentage, the number of courses. So 41 teachers total said that they had, to some level, had some training in special needs while they were undergoing their training in college. So this is the number, like 34% say they had one class in special needs, 36% they had 2 classes in special needs, 19% say they had 3 classes in special needs, and then about 9% or 10, they say they had about 4 courses in special needs. The next question was about post-college professional development. So we asked them if they had received any professional development in working with students with special needs. And again, the numbers, there was only 45% said they had at least 1 PD in special needs. And then we had 22% that say they had at least 2 PDs in special needs. 12% had at least 4 professional development workshops in special needs. 5% said they had at least 5 PDs in special needs. And then 5% also said they had at least 6 professional development opportunities post-secondary. So those were the numbers. And then when we looked at the question, the open-ended questions on what they perceive to be their strengths, this is and out. I'll just give you an opportunity to go through it. I went too fast. So this is some of the things the teachers said they perceive to be their strengths in working with students or supporting students with special needs in their inclusive classrooms. Ability to practice patience with the students, they said was a strength of them. Willingness to support them, meaning the students with special needs in the areas of weakness, the ability to encourage students, ability to understand students and their needs, ability to empathize with the students, and some of them felt they were compassionate. The ability to show students love, attentive to the students, ability to motivate students to raise their self-esteem, ability to treat all students equally, wide use of teaching methodologies, and collaborative. So everything that was listed as strength, none of them had to do with instruction, except for this one, wide use of teaching methodologies. That's one of the strengths. All of them had to do with personal empathy supporting, which points to the fact that they are willing to support the students, but they do not have the training or the tools to engage in the academics. Only one was listed as a strength in that area. So this question had to do with the supports. What kinds of supports they needed to be able to support students with special needs in those classrooms. I'm still on the strength, sorry. Sorry. Okay, I'm going back. Okay, there you go. What kinds of supports they needed? Here they go. And that was plenty. We just picked a few, actually. There was a whole list of what things they needed. We kind of just triangulated that into like the top ones that were there that were most repeated. Special training on how to handle students. Provision of adequate learning resources. Providing of necessary training equipment. Provision of facilities required by the students. Provision of teaching and learning materials. Workshops, training, they needed that. Infrastructure, critical. They say they needed that too. For example, ramps and pavement, they said that was critical and was needed. Provision of financial support. Attending seminars on how to handle students, again, professional development. Diversifying instructional methods. That alluded to them needing support on how to do that. Need of more practicals, against training, that's what it meant, and allocation of adequate time to work with the students. And again, going back to the numbers in the classrooms, and teachers struggling with being able to just attend to 1 or 2 students in their classrooms when they have a very big number of students in the classrooms. So the next question had to do with what kind of challenges have they experienced in supporting students with special needs, and those were also a lot more than what is listed up here. These were just the top that were most frequent and occurring in their responses, so that's what we chose to share. Lack of adequate time to support students, again due to congested timetable, lack of specialized training on how to work with the students, balancing teaching and learning needs of students with other learners in the same class, inadequate teaching and learning materials and resources, lack of enough of professional skills for handling students, inability to effectively communicate with students, poor or lack of customized infrastructure to cater for the needs of the students, lack of experience on handling students. Most students are slow. That one actually speaks to attitude and stigma. The teachers, this was frequent with a few teachers who said most students are slow to learn, and also points to the attitudes, but also lack of training in understanding the needs of those students. And then the last one was lack of knowledge on how to handle students. Again, these were just the top that were very, very prevalent in the responses. So we had 40 total. We just had a few of those that we listed. And this is the last slide. Further, you want to join me? Yes. Okay, so what does it mean for Kenya and where we see ourselves considering the Vision 2030 that says by 2030, all persons with disabilities, including students with disabilities, need to receive adequate supports and to enable them to succeed in the school and live in the society as productive individuals. So here is one of the implications and what we thought that all that data meant. So in regard to secondary education specifically, and I speak of secondary because I was a secondary school teacher in Kenya before I left to the United States. I did not have any training in special needs education. I was a Swahili and CRE teacher. I didn't know anything about special education until I got to the United States. And so what does that mean for secondary school teachers? There is a disconnect between the nation's expectations, what the Kenyan government expects, and the goals and the teacher experiences. They're not they don't have the experiences and the supports they need to help the country achieve the goals that they have set for Vision 2030. There's a gap between teacher training and the expectations, and there's a dire need for training and capacity building to adequately support students with special needs in Kenya, especially at the secondary level. And at the same time, we think that there are some opportunities that present themselves for Kenya to build on so they can help realize that goal of the Vision 2030. One of them is a thorough review of teacher preparation programs to incorporate special needs education training for all teachers. That is an opportunity that is there, but we know that KISE has been doing this work, especially for the lower grades, for preschool to about 5th grade. KISE is doing that work, is providing that training. And so what we can do is maybe as a country tap into the work that is going on at KISE and see how we can leverage that to build on that work so that teachers at the secondary school level can have similar trainings, especially in supporting students in the inclusive classrooms. And finally, we can capitalize on the newly adopted competency-based curriculum for Kenya, which is fully in place right now, because the competence-based curriculum is so very similar to what we have in the United States in supporting students with all kinds of needs, what we call universal design for learning, or UDL. I see very many parallels between the CBC, the competence-based curriculum, and the universal design for learning that is in the US. So I see the competence-based curriculum as an opportunity for especially teacher preparation programs to capitalize on that, to prepare our teachers, and specifically secondary school teachers, to support students with special needs in those inclusive classrooms. And that is my spiel for the day. Dr. Feather, what do you have to say?
Thank you so much, Professor Robai. You have done the presentation so well. In summary, what we are saying, this paper findings is coming at a real opportune time in Kenya, and the reason being we are having change of curriculum, and we have noted a severe gap. We appreciated from this paper, when we read the literature, the role of KISE, especially at the basic levels, and there's so many questions that arose. And I was happy when Professor came in and we were able to do this baseline survey, because from this, it is our wish that we also check out on the various other counties that were left out, because this forms a very strong baseline. And I would just want to comment on this, the implication and the recommendations, that quite a number of us here are from all categories. Either you are running a school, you are in the university. We are now beginning to embark on new curriculum for 2029. At the basic levels, the students are already there. And this is why from this paper, we are asking ourselves, what are we going to do next? Our curriculum is here. Do we have what it takes? We have now the information that something is lacking. We have done this at the university level. There could be some, and at the teachers who are in the field. But now what is really eating into us is the question on, do we have to wait for these students to reach the secondary schools level or higher levels for us to start changing something? Or from all that we are getting from our presentations, something needs to be seriously done beginning at the ECD level. Assuming our teachers, because I'll just give you an example of why this study is very important. One time I was observing a school. I went to a school to observe one of our students who was teaching. And there was a student there who could not sit upright because he had a hunch. And our student kept on shouting at this student, "Sit upright, or I'm throwing you out of my class." He repeated several times, and you see, as an observer, you're not supposed to stop this student. But I looked at this student so sharply, so he realized that he should not continue shouting at this boy. After another 20 minutes, he told the student, "I told you to stop sleeping, and you're not hearing you. Can you remove your sweater?" The student was still staring at the teacher. And that drove us to this kind of study. What kind of teachers are our universities giving to the society? And then in the society, what capacity building is being done? So those are the questions from these implications that together from this room you can raise one or two questions so that we can add something as we write up and finish this paper for presenting, and we hope that something good is going to come out of this, whether from any collaborations out there for us to do very good curriculum development, starting from the ECDE level to impact on society. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions from the audience regarding this study? Any comments? No questions? All right. Oh, we have a question.
Good morning. My name is Phyllis. My question is about the SNE, special needs. There are those who have invisible learning difficulties. Invisible learning difficulties that cannot be visible, and teachers, has this curriculum, is it part of what is going to be considered? And then this is a training that should be included, not for the special needs teachers, but all teachers across board should be the one learning. It should be a core course in all levels, whether preschool, ECD and all that, basic and even high school, because there are those who miss in the cracks and they find themselves at the high school, and the teachers in high school don't know what to do with them. Thank you.
That's a good question, and I will leave Dr. Feather to answer the second part of the question about the training. But I'm happy that you bring that. When I came to Kenya and in 2023, that was what was driving me, because I what we call like moderate to mild disabilities, students with, for example, ADHD, students with emotional behavioral disorders, students who are on the higher end of the SD spectrum disorders, who typically they don't have outward invisible disabilities. That's what's driving me, because when I went into special education and learned about the disabilities, I could go back all the way to my classmates from first grade all the way to high school, and I could point out those students and say this student had a specific learning disability, but teachers were not equipped for supporting them, and the strategy back then was retain them, they repeat the grades until they're too old to be in school, then they drop out. And so when we're thinking about supporting students with special needs in inclusive classrooms, on a personal level, I'm thinking of the students with the invisible disabilities, specific learning disabilities, and the mild behaviors. Of course, Kenya is somehow a step ahead when we think about students with visible disabilities. And this, like, for example, the schools that we visited, those are the students, it's obvious. But my focus and my concern is those students with the mild disabilities. And I'm thinking about every student, every teacher candidate taking the course. Really, that is what I would like to see. And I've studied that work with Egerton University, and Fedha can talk about the work a little bit.
When it comes to the last part of the question, when you're asking about how are we going to do it differently, and can we ensure that this becomes part of the core courses in the universities, especially the reading part. I would want to tell you that as we are continuing to present, we are picking out key recommendations that we are giving to the ministry, so that together the ministry can actually will give the policy briefs. From this, we are expecting some changes. So it's not just about the conference. A lot is happening. We are picking out the key areas that we expect changes to happen. So for instance, I'm going to go with your recommendation that we need all the curriculum starting from ECD, basic levels, up to the university levels, to have the key components so that every teacher educator leaving either the university or the teacher education institutions for the primary section, all of them have these key basics that are required so that we can identify our learners very fast. In August, we are having a conference in Embu for teacher educators, and it's cutting across. Part of the members who've been invited to this conference is the Ministry of Education, Commission for University Education. It is bringing all the 47 county educators in one conference. So we'll be asking the ministry, we gave you some of the areas we need in policy. Have you picked this up? So we are going to even invite quite a number of those who have not received the invitation. Thank you.
Is the next presenter here? Okay, we just take questions then.
I want to say that thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and as Dr. Fedha has just mentioned on the way forward, what we are thinking. I also want, as we move on, in as much as we are talking about the teacher education, there are already teachers who are in the field where you went and collected your data. Then I think we need to do also something for maybe in servicing them so that they can be at bar, and we try to close that gap. Another issue that I really that is coming out very well. We have everything, we have the training, but the implementation part is the challenge, and I hope and I wish that we could have somebody from the ministry so that we really look at the modalities. How are we going to implement? There are so many policies, there are so many studies that have been done, but then the implementation is the challenge. But I'm happy that with the competence-based curriculum, for the Dean's Schools of Education, we are trying to bring in so many things on board to pull on how to train our teachers, but still the gap remains with those that are in the field. So it is something that needs to be interrogated and to be taken further. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, you're 100% correct. We need professional development for the teachers in the field, and the results from the study do say that the teachers do want that kind of training so that they can support their students better.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that nice presentation. Actually, I would say it's an eye-opener in the field of education. And I totally agree with your recommendations, with your findings. But just to add, just about your findings and recommendations, you are looking at the experiences of these teachers. But we can't do that successfully when we isolate the community. So how I thought even the community, input would be very much crucial as part of the recommendations. For instance, these parents are the ones, the stakeholders, who would be sending their children to these schools. And without their support, then I think the gap will still continue to widen. The other issue is about the major education player that Dr. Feather has talked about. Like you realize the issue of Commission for University Education. They're the ones who approves curricula for higher education. Do they really consider the issue of SNE? How about the KICD? Like you talk about guidance and counseling, it's compulsory for all the trainers. How about the SNE? Why are they silent about it? And finally, is the issue of budgetary allocation. You realize that little is kept for capacity building for teacher in this area. So even as much as we talk about this, starting from national government, county government, they also have to come up with a kitty to ensure that this is going to be done well. Thank you.
Now, thank you so much. I just wanted to make a comment on the part of the community involvement. I think that is something that we will add on what is happening. But I just wanted to bring to your attention, after this, it led us to the next level where we are now doing another different survey. We had a project that went through, and we are collaborating with the University of Nairobi. Tanzania, we have 2 universities there, Muse and Duse, and Finland, we have Hamk University. Through that initiative, we are actually looking at supporting teacher retention and motivation, and this is part of it, because we are looking at the section of inclusivity. And part of the questions we will be asking is all the communities are involved. All the stakeholders are going to be part of that, the survey, and from there we take the next step. So this didn't take care of the community, but in this other project that is now ongoing, we are actually looking at the part of the community. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that comment, but also just to add on the community involvement, I always personally, and through experience, think that special needs teachers or teachers generally are agents of change, and we can start with them. If we can provide the necessary training to in-service teachers and prepare those that are in teacher preparation programs to support and advocate for students with special needs, then they can be the change agents that would be able to then extend that work into the community. So I think it is a big elephant. We have to take it up one bite at a time. And I think the best place to start is with providing the teachers with the necessary tools and training so that they can start supporting, and they will be the advocates to help bring that change even within the community. All right. That's all. Thank you so very much for coming and listening to our presentation. We're not sure about the next presenter where they're supposed to be here, so we have 15 minutes to kill before tea break. So we'll do that. You have tea break in 15 minutes, but you have some time to maybe talk to each other or a bathroom break before we go to tea break. All right?
We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Conference registration through Egerton University, and you'd like to have a receipt?
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education. We want you to be there. Practical training that relates and fits so well in the current world.
Egerton, teamwork!
Egerton University, transforming lives through quality education.